full moon, everyone. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. I'm Ella, Jeff's assistant. Thank you so much for joining us again. So great to see you. So yes, today we had full moon, February 2023, and it's known as a micromoon. Jeff's going to talk a little bit about that. Also, I was asking Jeff if he knew about nicknames for the months when the moon goes full. And I read today that February's full moon is called a snow moon, full snow moon, or full hunger moon. I think that's so kind of fun. But tonight, Jeff is going to go into a number of things. And first, a while ago, Jeff did a podcast on the law of seven. So where do we find ourselves now, Jeff, at the end of the winter now?
Well, that's great. Yeah, the law of seven, if you recall, we did a little short on that. And the law of seven is really where the 7-year itch comes from. And we've all heard of the 7-year itch. And if you haven't, you got to see that little movie with Marilyn Monroe. It's really cute. It's about the 7-year itch with marriage. At every multiples of 3s and 7s, we hit Mars or Saturn. So this also is applicable to the year. Now, for all of us who live above the equator in the northern hemisphere, this is going to apply. And I'll talk a minute about the folks down under below the equator, because I have a lot of clients that ask me, hey, what about when you live in the southern hemisphere? So the law of seven, just to review it, is the 752-day periods throughout the year. And notice 5 and 2 is what? 7. You got 7 holes in your head. You got 7 days of the week, 7 halls of heaven. 7 times 7 is 49. So 7 is a very sacred number. And it also rules the quarters of Saturn itself. Every 7 years, Saturn will either square, oppose, or on the 28th year, it will conjunct. So very interesting stuff about the law of seven. And we could go into that forever. But to keep this simple, there are 752 days throughout the year. Well, guess what? The 52 days before the sun period is from January 28th up until March 20th. So what that means is if you just do the math with the months, it works out perfectly to the spring equinox. Now, I know we're all celebrating, the new year on January 1st, but really the ancients took the new year as the spring equinox. And there were 7 52-day periods, starting with the sun, which is the seed, the moon, which is the crucible. So the first 52 days of the sun, the farmers plant the seeds at the springtime. The birds are chirping, the flowers are starting to bud, the animals are mating. It's just a really vivacious energy. Then the next 52 days, the spring rains water the seeds. The next 52 days is the heat of the summer, which is Mars. And that's where we see the assertion coming out with the seeds really coming to fruition. They either are going to grow or they're going to die with Mars. Mars is always action. Then the next 52 days is the Mercury period, which is harvest. And then we have the next 52 days, which is the abundance period of Jupiter. We always have Thanksgiving and all that. And then the final is the Venus before the Saturn, which is the recreation and the holiday periods, right? And then, of course, right at the end of January, doesn't everybody notice that you start feeling like, when's winter going to end? Especially those who live more in the northern areas of the country or Canada. We all feel that. I remember I lived up in northern Wisconsin. It was like, when the end of January kicks in, you're just dying to get it over with. I'm sure you felt that way too in New York, Ella. So the bottom line is, we are now in the final period of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, which is the 52 days of Saturn, which completes right on March 21st. So that's a little fun thing for everybody to be aware of. I always like to say it's a really good time right now to take care of yourself. What is Saturn? Saturn is the time of the year when the farmers have the fields plowed. They're reconsidering what they're going to plant in the spring. So it's a great time to jettison. It's kind of the divine or God's way of composting the soil, rejuvenating it, and getting it ready for replanting. So that's a great analogy in our lives. It's a great time to really kind of look around and say, well, what do I want to do? And we always hear about spring cleaning and all that, right? Well, this is the pre-spring cleaning where you kind of identify what you want to do, but you're too tired to do it because it's Saturn, right? So a little bit of a helpful tip that is always a constant throughout the years. One last thing I'll say about you folks down under, because I have a lot of clients in South America and Australia and different places in Southeast Asia. And yours is exactly opposite. Your spring equinox is the fall equinox in the north. And you just take the 52 days running from the fall equinox, which is typically right around September 21st. So that's your 52 days of the sun. The next 52 days is the moon, then Mars, then Mercury, then Jupiter, then Venus, and back to Saturn. So interesting stuff.
It's so cool. It's so cool because, our bodies just respond to it, don't they? Like I know at this time of year, even though I did grow up and live on the East Coast for many years, I still feel like at this time of year, living out here on the West Coast, I want to hibernate at this time of year. I only want to eat comfort foods. It's so interesting, really, really interesting how we respond to all the seasons and everything that's going on with the planets.
It is.
Touch on the full moon now.
Well, yeah, this full moon. You're right. It's a micromoon. And the reason she said it was a micromoon is because it is at what we call perigee. It's its farthest place. Apogee. Apogee is the farthest place away at which the moon can get from the Earth. So it's really, it has a little bit of a diminishing feeling. Also, the moon is higher in latitude right now. See, the moon flips up and down above and below what we call the ecliptic every month. It's very powerful. And the moon actually appears to speed up and slow down. So the moon is right now at what we call the bendings. The bendings is a strange word for, in fact, it's looked at a lot in interrogation, electional astrology. And the bendings is the 90-degree points from the eclipse points, also known as the moon's north and south nodes. And they do have an interesting energy of change. It's kind of a hinge point where we feel like, we want to alter things. So very powerful. And then, of course, there's always the lunar mansions, which are clearly involved in the Vedic astrology. And again, right now, the lunar mansion for the moon in this current time is a good mansion. It's not a problem at all. It's it's sitting here in Astro-Location, which is not a bad one. It's Mercury, it's productive, so on and so forth. So this is a time of kind of rejuvenating and getting ready to head into the spring. So there you go. Right.
Well, now, what about, you were mentioning Saturn over the moon, right, on the United States?
Right. Now we go to the bigger picture, looking at what's happening right now with the good old US of A. Well, one of the things that we have right now is the sidereal. When I say sidereal, that most people equate that to Vedic astrology, which is true. So the sidereal timing can be off a little bit from the tropical. And we've actually got the transit of Saturn over the United States moon 3 times this year. The first one is going to start right in March 11th. So here we are sitting in February. And, we're in the first week of February. So what we're going to find here is it's coming in over the moon. It's in what we call the orb of influence. Very, very powerful. And you're going to find things are going to become a little more solemn. Of course, we hear about the weather balloon and all that from China. And I got to tell you, that to me is a bunch of white noise. Yeah, okay, they did what they did. But I know the U.S. military has such sophisticated radar and detection equipment. They probably not only knew that the balloon was coming, they probably knew when they were filling it up with hydrogen. But, so I don't know what the politicization of that was, but in any event, they shot it down and we're all safe, right? But the war in Ukraine rages on, and we're seeing, Russia's trying to win a war of attrition, and we're selling arms. And it's crazy because We'll see where this all goes. That's a very dangerous situation. I really think the owners at the top of the pyramid, again, are pushing a lot of agendas right now in a global sense. And I think the biggest one that I noticed is, again, and it's not said too much in the mind control news, but we're continuing to see the erosion of crime in cities, the borders, the fentanyl, the releasements of a lot of, criminals, and, or you could say non-punishment for it. They're just letting people right back out again. So it's a crazy time. And again, this fits into the bigger picture of all the stuff we mentioned in the last podcast, which is the Pluto return on the United States that really comes in the sidereal zodiac next year. It really comes on strong. But this right now, over this next month, is, again, the planet of karma and Saturn releasing on the moon. And that's called Sadhisate in Vedic astrology. And it has a lot to do with the releasement of old karmas. And that's a complex subject when you're talking about a country and the world. So we're seeing a lot of energies line up here. And again, the Sadhisate happens every 28 and a half years. So this is not like something that's never happened before, but it's a powerful time of karmic release. And it's happening in the landscape of these bigger progressions like the Pluto return. Also, I might mention, we have the completion of the Neptune square Mars in the sidereal zodiac coming right up almost the same time that Saturn goes over the United States moon. Now you might say, okay, great. What does that mean? Neptune square Mars is really a very, very tricky subterfuge energy. It is confusion and delusion. This is the energy that happened right before the Civil War in 1861. And right after that, we know what happened, right? So I don't think we're ever going to see a war like that in the United States. It's not even set up to happen that way. But I do think we're going to see more dissension in the upper ranks between the globalists and the nationalists. And this is something, again, that our news networks aren't reporting, and it's not there for them to report. I call them the teleprompter readers because that's kind of what they are. And not to demean them, some of them are really good. But on the other hand, there's a lot of disinformation and trickery that comes with Neptune square Mars. Also, the United States goes into a Neptune opposition. This is the first time also in the existence of this country that's happened. So we have energies that are exceedingly powerful on this country. Again, I say this country may not be here as we know it at the end of 2024. This is going to be an election year that's going to be very unpredictable and crazy. So,
Well, we did have a number of people ask about Ukraine, and I'm wondering if we could just do an interrogation now, maybe. People are just very concerned. I personally have a number of friends on social media who are living in Ukraine, and they're just very, very concerned, obviously.
As well they should be. Yeah. Here, I'll do that right now. We can do that right now. That's fun. You can't see what I'm doing. Maybe I should share the screen so you could, but should I do that?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
All right. So here's what I'm going to do. Let me come back, and you'll see what I'm doing here behind the curtain as Toto pulls the curtain back. And so we'll just go to a screen share here, and bing bong. You see what I just did? I literally cast a chart from my location, my time. It's 6:03 when we did this, Ukraine issues. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm literally casting a chart. Well, the Eastern horizon becomes us collectively the querent. Ukraine, because this is not a simple question, this is a question that involves a foreign power, which is the ninth house, which is Ukraine. They would be Mars. Why? Because Aries is there, and of course, it's in the midheaven. What I don't like about this is, right off the bat, is the moon, the all-important co-mixer of all energies on the physical plane, you can see is going to an opposition of Saturn. Plain English, not a good omen. That shows this is likely to have more trouble. You can actually see here, I'm circling right there. So the moon is opposing Saturn by 6 degrees. You can see it's almost exactly 6 degrees. You can see where I'm underlining here, 6A00. A means approaching. See, now these others you don't pay attention to because it says separating. That's the S nomenclature you see right there. See, so that tells me what's applying and separating. So getting a little look here behind the curtain. So that is not a good omen. Secondly, I would say Mars has just separated from a square of Venus. You can see that's OS 55. And of course, it has not been a bowl of cherries over there. I would really say that Russia is the seventh house. It shows this is going to press on for a while. And here's another reason why. In interrogation astrology, that arrow is the eastern horizon where I cast the chart. That's the midheaven where the sun is at noon. That's the descendant where the sun sets. And that's the IC. And if you notice, every sign on all of what we call the angles or stakes are fixed. Plain English, it's not going to go away right away. This is something I really think Russia is trying to win a war of attrition. They don't want to lose Crimea. I think they'll do whatever they can to keep it. But in a previous podcast, we had also mentioned that will there be nuclear war? My take was based on that previous interrogation. No, but this could get pretty heated, and maybe so much so that ultimately, when enough insanity and death happens, they'll finally, like most wars, negotiate some type of resolution where Russia keeps Crimea. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. The all-important sun, which is us, the collective querents, is going to a conjunction of Saturn. That's the next big thing here. So that, in plain English, ain't looking too resolute here in terms of anything ending tomorrow or the next day. This is going to press on for a while. So I would say, based on this, we could potentially see this carrying on either 9.5 more months or thereabouts. And it could be a little less, a little longer, but that's what it shows. This is not going to resolve quickly. And there might be a substantial event as the moon opposes the Saturn. We can't take degrees, and timing is very hard to get. But because the moon is in a fixed sign, I would equate that to probably be some events could really matriculate about 6 months, which would put us right into summer. That may tip the scales as to how this thing is going to resolve. And then with the sun going to a conjunction of Saturn, I think that's going to bring either closure to this or a resolution, but it doesn't look like right away.
That's really unfortunate. I don't think
it is.
Took a look at Putin's chart. Maybe we'll do that at some point.
Yeah, I have done that. I have them in here, but again, interrogation is a really useful tool, but we can certainly look at Putin's chart as well because he is the leader of the country. Yeah, but when you're dealing with a situation with this much dynamics, you've got NATO. Basically, if NATO and the United States weren't supporting Ukraine, this would be over with. Russia would have had them already. So the fact that that's being supported, I don't think Russia wants a war with, let me go back to that. I'm not going to reshare the screen, but let me look at that. Yeah, Russia doesn't seem like it's got the teeth to want to go into a major war with the United States. It wouldn't win. I can tell you that right now. Even with China, it wouldn't. A lot of people, a lot of generals are saying, we're depleting our stockpile. They have to realize the black ops that is in existence right now. I mean, we've got particle beams, laser beams, literally mounted on jets, destroyers, and satellites, etc. You don't deplete those. You just fire them. So this is getting like Star Wars, truly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Scary stuff. And what's fascinating, I was just on Coast the other day, and we didn't talk about it on the air, but I have talked about this with a lot of different ufology people. And there's overwhelming evidence. I mean, I've literally heard commanders, and these aren't people who are just, shining up the silos. These are people who ran, like at Maelstrom Air Force Base, and various different nuclear silo installations or nuclear arsenals have said they have seen light orbs around various installations, and afterwards things didn't work. And their personal opinions, and they said it right out. We believe it's either angelic or extraterrestrial forces stopping something from happening. And that, to me, I mean, I don't want to give, unwarranted comfort, but I really believe these men are true. I mean, these are very, very intelligent persons running this stuff. You don't get to run a nuclear installation or a commander of it, by being some flunky. And these people are very rational, and they wouldn't say what they're saying if it wasn't true. And I can tell you in the last 30, 40 years, I have been around so much paranormal stuff to know that there are divine forces that, the world gets crazy and a lot of people die. But I think utter destruction of the planet would be stopped. That's my opinion.
Yeah. It's been stopped before.
It sure seems to have been, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for tapping into all that.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for watching. We kept this one short and sweet, and we'll see you real soon.
You bet. Thank you for watching.